I will just give you a brief summary of the work of the European Capital Culture campaign and the bidding process and what's ahead. Um, to become a European capital of culture, this is an old ambition, very old in Umeå. It has been under discussion for 15 years in various shapes, from politicians and from civil servants and from cultural artists and so on. And when EU finally made the agenda, it was 7 years ago, they managed to say that 2014, Sweden and, Latvia will be European Capital of Culture, will host. So the domestic bidding was the process. The winning city in each country would become European Capital of Culture. So this bidding process started 2006. And since Umeå has been a good cultural outpost in the north, reputation, kind of a attitude, culture, reputation, not pretty much a mainstream city. It's been a city of ideas and a strong impact, especially on the young music scene. So we started this bidding with the knowledge that Umeå has a good reputation and many ideas how a cultural city should be in the future. So we open up the bid for anyone to contribute. We had open meetings, around 70 open meetings in the end, where we gave information about how to work and what this is, the European Capital of Culture, the history from 1985 and so on. And in the end, we had got that much information so we can build the first bid, which the jury liked. It was in 2008. So they put two cities on the short list. It was Umeå in the north and Lund in the far south. And our key aspects was to work with the northern perspective on European issues. We call it the northern room in the European house. We kind of like that. And by the way, our cooperation with Scottish artists has actually a track record. We have been in this program from the northern periphery within the European Union. So before I was working as an actor and a director at the theater, we had many cross-border connections with especially Glasgow and Edinburgh. So many artists have been here and some are still on tour. And the voiceover from on our movie image film for the European Capital Culture is from one of the artists. So it's Matthew Sajic is his name. He's an actor. Anyhow, yeah, he's the voiceover for our... And he was here. He was playing, with the theater in Skellefteå in the north. It's the county theater. He was there on tour playing Ibsen play, When We Dead Awakens. So he was actually here, and I worked with him in another workshop during this Northern Periphery Corporation. So, and we wanted a voiceover to the movie. This was during the bidding, and I saw him on stage, and I felt that I'm going to ask Matthew. So we did that, and he said, yes, of course. So that's the way. And finally, we faced the jury with all our ambitions, and the key word has been, as I said, the Northern view, to work in an open source environment, to try to be as open as possible, to get people involved in the process and to lower the thresholds to cultural activities and to open up the spirit. Then we have the cross-border connections and also, of course, the idea of diversity, to see how can we, from a northern point of view, I mean, we have been in the periphery for many, many years. If you look at the European weather map from CNN or BBC or whatever, it stops at Stockholm and up here is like nothing. So we want to change that, the cultural remapping of Europe. So now we're building the program for the coming year, and it will be built on the concept of the 8 seasons of the Sami calendar, which is different from the 4 seasons what we know them, because it's now we're approaching the spring winter, which is coming in 3 or 4 weeks, when we have winter, but it's still warm and you can go out, but the snow is still there, and so it goes. So it double ups the seasons. So each season will have a kind of ritual where we have things coming back to us, like we're building a completely new symphony, which is now being commission. Thank you. From different kind of composers and organizations. We're going to build this season's, it's 8-season symphony. So each set of the symphony will be open during every shift of the season. So we will have many activities that runs in the amount of 8. And we'll have, like this square outside here will be rebuilt 8 times that year, following the seasons. And it's not only like spring, winter, or spring or summer, it's the feeling which is important. So the spring, winter goes under the term the season of awakening. Then we have the season when the spring comes, the season of returning. Then we have the season of growing, the season of contemplation, the season of desire is actually when the reindeer mate. So that gives us energy to work with this. So when we want new pieces of culture and art to be written or made, the artist can relate to that season's emotion. But Chris has been in Umeå for many years ago. He was very important for me as an actor when we had this festival called Korsväg, or the Crossroads, with Ista as the main partner.
Which is the International School of Theater Anthropology, and we did they do that every few years depending on if there is a host, and Umeå was hosting that, so there were people from India, Bali, whole companies from at least 6 or 7 of all 5 continents, etc., that were both performing, but also they were teaching and working together with about 100 people, I think, that were students, let's call them, or collaborators in this ISTA work. Yeah.
And it was, since I was active at that time at a theater company, we was invited to be as participants to these workshops. It was very tough to be involved in this because there was so many, no, you're not good enough, or not, no. So we had to fight ourselves to get in there. And when we finally it was around 100 persons from all over the world in a small village around 70 kilometers to the north called Lövånger. It's an old church village with small cabins. Before in Sweden, the distance was we were so far away from each other, so when we went to church, we had to stay for a couple of days. So that's when we built cabins around the churches so we can stay there. It was actually an open source idea to let people give the possibility, because the distance made the churches, you couldn't come and listen to the preacher man who could interpret what was in the Bible for you, because you couldn't read. But because of the distance, you could say, well, anyhow, you have to read yourself. We can't do this. You can't come every Sunday. So that made people in the northern region of Sweden, around 1780, 75% could read. In Vienna at that time, I think it was 12%. So people could read and write in the north. Yeah, and that is what we focus on when we see the stories of the north. You can see that our writers, our famous writers, come from small villages in the outposts.
But you can imagine that what a cultural capital project of this kind, and of course the increase in budget and possibilities of creating international connections, means for a city of 100,000 people. And one of the things that we've learned during our SEAS project, since Adam and I and others started working already in 2003 on SEAS, which has now come to its conclusion, was that smaller towns, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th cities, harbor cities, not the capital cities. Istanbul was an exception because it's so huge. And we felt in Istanbul a little bit like a drop in the ocean. You know, we could come in there and we could put massive amounts of energy into it and massive numbers of people, and still, you know, nobody in Istanbul knew anything really that was going on, except for a few thousand people in small circles. And this is one of the things that I think is quite fascinating, quite exciting, is that the Cultural Capital Program has arrived at that point where it's no longer the capital cities. They are cultural capitals, but it's not Paris, Amsterdam, Stockholm, Berlin, etc. It's Umeå, Åbo, even very small towns in Guimarães in Portugal, Pech. I mean, there's another thing happening there, and I find that has a lot to do with life quality. That smaller towns and the intimacy, everyone knows everyone. The cultural life is somehow interconnected, and then adding to it this international dimension has really a lot to do with the kind of what I at least think culture might or the arts might actually have as a function in our society. Not just consuming something in the city and competing with musicals and films and big things, but actually participation in some way. And I think that's a little bit what you mean by open source, no? And this again, connecting to Scotland, because this is a Swedish part of the collaboration right now. Obviously, Scotland, I mean, apart from Glasgow and Edinburgh, but Scotland has also these outer reaches, and which is, of course, what attracted us to Scotland. Not so much the big city, the Edinburgh Festival. This runs its own life somehow. What's interesting, of course, is when we were in Aberdeen, where we started, and even other, out in. I mean, you know better yourselves as the Scottish artists, but that entering into those places, I mean, where a relatively small, almost acupunctural press can create all kinds of synergies that would not normally happen in the huge cities.